What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another post-game show here on Mets Central. This is post-game show or Mets fan reaction game 150, where the New York Mets scrape out a win by their skin of their teeth as they defeat the Texas Rangers by a final score of 5-2, as they are able to salvage the final game of this three-game set against the Texas Rangers, where unfortunately they do end up dropping this three-game set to the Rangers by a final score of 2-1. Look, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. Like, I'm happy that the Mets won the game, but which is weird to say this, right? Like, I'm happy that they won because obviously I want to see them win games. I do want to see them make the playoffs, but it's just with how this season has turned and with how they've played baseball specifically for the majority of this season, and even for this, poor stretch where, thankfully because of this win, they snap a 8-game losing streak. When Pete Alonso hit that home run, like, I'm going to be honest, and look, maybe some of you guys don't agree watching this post-game stream, and, maybe you guys have different thoughts about me, like, I'm not a real fan, how could you not be excited? Listen, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, right? But just the way these last couple weeks have gone through, and like I said, I'm happy that they won. But when I saw Pete Alonso's home run ball fly over the right field wall, I really didn't have too much of a reaction to it because just because the way they are winning these games. And listen, I get that right now they put themselves in a position where they have to win games. And listen, not every win is going to be pretty, but it's just like this game was so close to being a rinse and repeat of yesterday's game, because, and listen, like I said, there were a ton of similar aspects to yesterday's game where, for the most part, the offense was not really clicking on all cylinders. I mean, they had plenty of opportunities earlier in this game to drive a couple runs in, whether that's the first inning where, they had a runner on second base, whether that was the second inning where they had bases loaded, whether it was, the ninth inning where they had Cedric Mullins on first base after a 1-out single. But they just, like I said, once again, the offense for the most part wasn't clicking. They go up 2-0. They end up blowing that lead late in the game thanks to, a bullpen implosion, and then again some bullpen mismanagement from Carlos Mendoza, which again, it's not too much of a surprise. We've called this out constantly, me and Evan, over this series for over the season for the most part. And like I said, and the thing that was so glaring when you compare this game and yesterday's game, where and especially where it looked like, once the Rangers tied up this game at 2-2 in the top of the seventh inning, the part of this game that was so frustrating similar to yesterday's game was the fact that it looked like the Mets were going to waste another very good start by one of the young pitchers. Because if you guys recall yesterday's game, Brandon Sproat goes out there, he pitches 6 really good innings. He gets taken out, in my opinion, prematurely after only 70 pitches through 6 innings. And again, you're kind of looking, it's like, what was the point of taking out Brandon Sproat at this point? He was going well. There was really no reason for me. And listen, maybe some people would disagree with that, but for me, I would have at least, and, even Evan brought this up yesterday. For me, I would have let Sproat start that 7th inning yesterday, but, that's in the past now. You really can't do anything about that. But, Nolan McLean, he goes out there. And by the way, like, I have to just applaud Nolan McLean for this game, because in a span and, just in the time of the season right now where the Mets are just so desperate for wins, they're so desperate for any kind of, just decent start from a starting pitcher. And, and this goes for Brandon Sproat too, which I'm also going to give him a round of applause too for his start. You have to give a lot of credit to Nolan McLean, because again, this is a kid, 24 years old, being called up in a desperate crisis by this team. And so far, every start he's gone out there and he's pitched his heart out. He's left everything on the mound in every single one of these 5 starts that he's had. Obviously, listen, he's gone, I believe 4-0 right now is his record, because I believe or actually it's 4-1 because he did get charged with a loss against the Phillies back on Monday at Citizens Bank Park. But like I said, you just gotta give so much credit to Nolan McLean. I mean, look, like I said, with McLean, I thought he was very good today. the way he started this game, I thought he did start off a little bit shaky because especially when you do look at the breakdown of this game, his first 5 batters, like I said, wasn't the sharpest. He actually his first 5 batters, he got behind each of them 2-0, and like I said, he went out there, he made some adjustments, and even Ron Darling talked about this on the broadcast when McLean started going down, 2-0 to the first 5 batters. He was saying it's not so much of control issue by McLean. It's just the fact that when you watch his pitches, he generates so much spin and so much movement on his pitches that he can kind of lose that feel a little bit. But once he got out of that first inning, and then once he got out of that second inning specifically, he really dialed in, and he was just going inning after inning after inning. He was throwing strikes. He was generating plenty of swings and misses. He was getting a plenty weak contact fly balls, weak contact ground balls as well. So I have to give major credit to Nolan McLean, and even again, when you look at the pitching breakdown, the part with McLean, and this is something that me and Evan talked about. The one part of McLean's game that we really like is he has a deep arsenal, and he really utilizes every single pitch well. I mean, finished this game 6 innings, 92 pitches at the end of the 6 innings, and like I said, used every pitch a decent amount of times. Sinker 27 times, and by the way, that sinker today, in my opinion, unless I wasn't really paying attention to any other specific pitch, but I mean, to me, I felt like I was pretty locked into this game. But Nolan McLean's sinker today was just it was beautiful. It was pinpoint. He was getting, he was freezing plenty of opposing hitters with that. He was generating a ton of swings and misses with that too. And like I said, the location of that pitch was just so good. I mean, even even on the breakdown too, because like I said, threw the sinker 27 times, 12 swings, 2 whiffs, threw that pitch 63% in the zone, and then zone swing rate also at 53% as well. So that sinker was just so good today for Nolan McLean. And then again, sweeper threw that 24 times, got 10 swings, no whiffs on that. 4-seamer 14 times. And then by the way, even with the sweeper, threw 75% of the zone, 44% zone swing rate as well. Cutter threw it 11 times, 3 swings, 1 whiff. Changeup threw that 8 times, 3 swings, 1 whiffs, and then the curveball threw that 8 times and only was able to generate 1 swing and no whiffs. But like I said with Nolan McLean, like the guy he goes out there and he leaves everything on the mound, and that's something I have to really appreciate that. And again, like I'm gonna remind you guys, this is a 24-year-old kid who was brought up in crisis time for this Mets team, and he has taken the mantle of ace and has just ran with it. So, and listen, I'm not saying that Nolan McLean, just off these 5 starts, is going to be Jacob deGrom 2.0. I'm not saying that because, listen, obviously, the more and more starts he makes, the more teams, obviously, they're going to watch more film on him. They're going to adjust. So, naturally, he's going to have to adjust too. But I think he has the stuff, and I think he's capable of making those adjustments when, time comes to that. So, and listen, I think the Mets have a gem on their hands. And same applies to Sproat. I'm not saying that Sproat's going to, be the same level of McLean, but I think the Mets have a decent starter in Sproat there too. And then also with John Tong, listen, I get that Tong he got lit up in his start on Friday, which we'll talk about that more on the podcast tomorrow, which we're going to end up breaking down and covering this series. Tong's gonna be fine. I have no worries about him. Obviously you don't like to see a young starting pitcher like that get beat up in a start like that, but it happens. It's a learning curve. He's going to make adjustments. Like I said, it's a learning curve. John Tong will be fine. But guys, just to continue on with this game, I mean, like I stated before I got into my Nolan McLean little rant there and just praising him. Yeah, this game, listen, was not pretty. It was not pretty at all because, as I mentioned before, the Mets had plenty of opportunities in this game to go ahead early in this game, cement and put their foots down on the throats of the Texas Rangers. And again, something similar that we have seen throughout this whole season, by the way, is not being able to take advantage with runner scoring position. And again, this team today, 1 for 9 with runner scoring position, 8 men left on base. And there was a lot of guys that did not have great games. Francisco Lindor, went 1 for 3. Would like to see a little bit better for him. He did draw 2 walks though, so I'm not really going to get too much on Lindor. But again, he needs to get back into a hot form, especially with only 12 more games left in the season. Juan Soto, he did not have a great game at the plate today. 0 for 4 with the 1 walk, 1 strikeout, and he came up a ton with runs scoring position today, and he was not able to get that big hit. Pete Alonso, up until that walk-off home run that he did have in the 10th inning, he did not have a great game, but credit to him for getting that big walk-off home run. Brandon Nimmo went 1 for 4 with a solo home run, 2 strikeouts. Apart from the solo home run that he had back in the bottom of the 6th inning, would like to see a bit better than him. Mark Vientos, rough day to plate, 0 for 4, 1 strikeout. Jeff McNeil, again, 0 for 4. So, and then even Starling Marte, he had the 1 hit and 3 at bats. So you want to see a bit better for some of these guys. And again, I hate that we have to repeat ourselves because again, it's the same type of issues that we've talked about. It's just and again, it's like we've been saying, both me and Evan, it's like this is just who this team is, kind of. It's like you're really not going to get consistent performances from not anyone at the same time. It's really hit or miss. It's like one guy's going to go through a good stretch, then one guy's going to go through a bad stretch, and it's like you really just can't sometimes get everyone to click on the same page. And then you'll see points where like the majority of the lineup, they get cold and then they'll get hot at some points. And again, like it's just something where we talk about with the whole bipolar offense. But I mean, like I'm really tired of complaining about that because again, this is a habit that's not even gone on for this season, but for the past 4 years. It's just it's really frustrating to watch. But I mean, also, I mean, just Carlos Mendoza, and we'll get to this more as we break down the game. But it just, again, I felt like another poor decision for him in terms of how he handled his bullpen. But anyway, guys, as we transition now into actually breaking down the game and going over what happened in the game, before we do that, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe on the channel as well. We greatly appreciate you guys supporting on the channel. Hit the notification bell to let you guys know anytime we upload a video, or anytime we upload a video or go live on the channel. And yeah, as I said, hit the subscribe button because we always appreciate your support here. But like I mentioned before, on the mound for the New York Mets, it was Nolan McLean. And then on the mound for the Texas Rangers was Jackson Latz. So starting off the game, we move on to the top of the 1st inning. Like I said, McLean here, specifically in these first 2 innings, really didn't have the greatest control of the stuff. Like I said, went down 2-0 on the first 5 batters of this game, but he was able to dial in, gets Josh Smith to strike out, gets Wyatt Langford to strike out, ends up walking Jock Peterson on 4 straight pitches, but is able to get Adolfo Garcia to line out to end that inning. We then move on to the bottom of the 1st. Francisco Lindor walks. He would then steal second base. Unfortunately, the Mets would not be able to drive in Lindor here, as Juan Soto would strike out. Pete Alonso would then walk. Brendan Nimmo would pop out, and then Mark Vientos would strike out to end that inning. We then move on to the top of the 2nd. Rowdy Tellez strikes out. Josh Jung would ground out. Alejandro Osuna would hit a single. And then Kyle Higashioka would ground out to get out of that inning. So good work there by McLean. We then move on to the bottom of the 2nd. Jeff McNeil would line out to start the inning. Starling Marte singles. Cedric Mullins flies out. And then back-to-back walks here by Francisco Lindor and Francisco Alvarez to load up the bases. Unfortunately, Juan Soto, just like the 1st inning where he had a runner in scoring position with Lindor, he was unable to drive in any runs here as he grounds out to first base to escape to get out of that inning. And once again, the Mets do not score any runs. Top of the 3rd, quick 1-3 inning here by Nolan McLean. So good work by him. We then move on to the bottom of the 3rd. Nothing going there for the Mets. So 1-2-3 inning. Top of the 4th, Jock Peterson leads off the inning with a single. Adolfo Garcia would then ground into a double play. So very good work there by Nolan McLean. Rowdy Tellez then hits a single. Fortunately, though, McLean is able to bounce back as he gets Josh Jung to strike out. We then move on to the bottom of the 4th. Again, a 1-2-3 inning there for the Mets. Top of the 5th, Alejandro Osuna strikes out. Kyle Higashioka then strikes out. Cody Freeman hits a double. Josh Smith walks. So really the first time that Nolan McLean would get into any sort of trouble here in this game, and he's able to bolt down. Doesn't let any damage come across as he gets Wyatt Langford to strike out. We then move on to the bottom of the 5th. Francisco Alvarez hits a double. Francisco Lindor would ground out, but thankfully Lindor puts in the correct position, so Alvarez is able to move up to third base on that ground out. Then Juan Soto comes up and he hits a ground ball to first base. Rowdy Tellez would step on first base, but thankfully some good heads up base running there by Francisco Alvarez as he's able to dive in to beat out Jonah Heim's tag or Kyle Higashioka's tag at the plate. So the Mets go up 1-0 there. Then the Rangers would make a pitching change as Cole Winn comes in to replace Jacob Latz. Pete Alonso would then line out to end that inning. We then move on to the top of the sixth. Jock Peterson flies out. Adolis Garcia will be hit by the pitch. Rowdy Tellez hits a single to once again put the Rangers in the scoring position. So first and second here for the Rangers, 1 out. And thankfully, Nolan McLean, just like the last inning, gets into some trouble, but he doesn't let that fluster him as he gets Josh Jung to ground into an inning-ending double play. So again, like I mentioned before, just great work here by Nolan McLean, and just to put up his final pitching line. 6 innings, 5 hits, no runs, no earned runs, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, no home runs, and his ERA currently sits at a 1.19 ERA. So like I mentioned before with McLean, and as I've done this whole post-game show so far, again, just fantastic work by him. You get the 6 full innings, no runs allowed, 7 strikeouts. Love the swing and miss stuff. Only 2 walks, so his control for the most part, except for the beginning of the game, was pretty much in full control. And even like I mentioned, in those innings in the 5th or 6th inning where he got into some trouble, he was able to bulk down and get out of those jams. So once again, great work by Nolan McLean. We then move on to the bottom of the 6th. Brandon Nimmo would start that inning with a leadoff home run to put the Mets up 2-0. Mark Vientos then grounds out. Jacob Webb would come in to replace Cole Winn, so a pitching change there for the Texas Rangers. Jeff McGill would pop out, and then Starling Marte would strike out to end that inning. We then move on to the top of the 7th. So Brooks Raley would come in to replace Nolan McLean. And listen, I had no problem with the change. McLean was already at 92 innings. Brooks Raley has been one of the most trusted arms in this bullpen so far, especially in the second half where the bullpen has just been disastrous for this Mets team. So he comes in. The Rangers then make a pinch hitting change as Michael Hellman comes in to replace Alejandro Osuna. So Brooks Raley allows a leadoff single to Michael Hellman. He then gets Kyle Higashioka to fly out. He then gets Cody Freeman to fly out. He then hits Josh Smith with a pitch. So you have first and second here with 2 outs. And Carlos Mendoza, once again here, makes a bullpen decision, which I do not agree with. So he brings in Reed Garrett, and listen, this is the part that I don't agree with. So Reed Garrett, since coming off the IL, once again, he's picked off from where he was hurt, where, he had the initial first outing where he looked good, but his last couple outings, again, he hasn't looked good. He's given up hard contact. He's been getting behind in counts, and he's really struggled with guys on base. So again, and this is a situation that both me and Evan have talked about with the biggest issue that we've had with Mendoza is not only his bullpen management, but it's also his lack of awareness of not putting his players in the best position to succeed. And you have Brooks Raley, and listen, I get that Raley wasn't, necessarily his sharpest in this outing, but, I trust Brooks Raley a hell of a lot more with 2 out, 2 on in the top of the 7th than I do with instead of bringing in Reed Garrett in that same situation. Because, like I said, while Raley wasn't the sharpest in the situation, he didn't have the greatest command of his stuff. I still trust Raley in that spot because he's able to, with his stuff specifically, he's able to induce soft contact outs. He doesn't give up any loud or hard contact outs, and he's able to control the strike zone pretty well. And for me, like I said, when you have Reed Garrett, specifically a guy that hasn't had the greatest command and hasn't had the greatest, control of the stuff since he's come off the IL, to me, putting him in that spot, it's the same situation again that we talk about, bringing in Tyler Rogers. It's like bringing in Tyler Rogers when there's no one on base. It's smart because, whenever he's able to induce soft contact outs, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't come back to bite him necessarily in spots. And then same applies here to Reed Garrett. It's like, Reed Garrett has been struggling since coming off the IL. Why are you bringing him into a spot where, and essentially it's, you make one mistake, the game is all tied up. And that's what happens because Reed Garrett comes into the spot. He walks Wyatt Langford after being ahead of him 0-2. So he loses him by throwing, by throwing not 4 straight balls, but like I said, he was up 0-2 and ends up losing him on a walk there. And then hangs a cutter over the middle of Jock Peterson. He drives it into right field to tie the game at 2-2. And then thankfully no more damage would be done that inning as Adolis Garcia would fly out to end that inning. But again, it's like It's just these little simple mistakes that Carlos Mendoza makes. And it's just like, again, and we're going to talk about this more on the podcast tomorrow, but again, it's one of those reasons for me that, why Mendoza just should not be back next year. Like, to me, he just does not have a good feel of his bullpen and of, just the situation also in whenever these situations come up, where it's a tight game, you have to make these smart little decisions. And for me, again, Mendoza just, he doesn't for me, he doesn't feel like he has a feel of the game. And it's really concerning to see from someone, that for the most part had a good season last year, but I just don't know with Mendoza anymore. I mean, obviously, you guys know me and Evan's, opinions on how we feel with Mendoza, but it's just, again, just another shaky game by him. We then move on to the bottom of the seventh, though. A couple defensive substitutions here for the Texas Rangers. Cedric Mullins strikes out. Francisco Alvarez singles. Holby Milner comes in to replace Jacob Webb. Lindor singles. Juan Soto flies out. And then Pete Alonso flies out. So, again, the Mets could not score any runs in that inning. We then move on to the top of the eighth. Tyler Rogers comes in to replace Reed Garrett. And good work here by Tyler Rogers as he's able to get Rowdy Tellez to line out. He gets Josh Jung to ground out, and then he gets Michael Hellman to ground out as well. We then move on to the bottom of the eighth. Robert Garcia comes in to replace Holby Milner. Again, the Mets could not get anything going here as Brandon Nimmo strikes out, Vientos flies out, and Jeff McNeil grounds out to end that inning. We then move on to the top of the ninth inning, and this is where, like I mentioned before at the start of this postgame show, where the game felt so similar to yesterday's game, where we move on to the top of the ninth. Edwin Diaz comes in, and again, Diaz just doesn't have his best stuff because he gives up a leadoff single to Kyle Higashioka. Ezekiel Duran that comes into pinch runs for him. He steals second base. Cody Freeman then ends up hitting a sacrifice bunt. So, you have a runner on third with only one out, so you only need a sacrifice fly for the Rangers to take the lead. And then just a fortunate break here by the Mets is Josh Smith just, not even a dribbler, but he hits a little what's the word I'm looking here? A little nubbler that doesn't hit the ground. It stays up. Lindor's able to catch it. In midair, and he throws it back to third base to get Cody Freeman to ground out. So a really strange double play that, thankfully goes the Mets away and is able to get them out of that inning. We then move on to the bottom of the ninth. Duran remains in the game, and then a pitching change for the Rangers as Sean Armstrong comes in to replace Robert Garcia. Brett Beatty would come in to pinch hit for Starling Marte. Brett Beatty would then strike out. Cedric Mullins then hits a single. And again, this is an issue that me and Evan have talked about plenty of times here when we've done our podcast, or even, when we break down these games in our post-game streams. So there's one out. Cedric Mullins hits a single. Why are you not stealing here with Cedric Mullins? Why are you not sending him? And again, this is something that we've seen plenty of times with the Mets over the past couple of weeks, where it's like, again, this is a team that is struggling for wins. You have two teams in the Cincinnati Reds, the San Francisco Giants, and even the Arizona Diamondbacks that are currently chasing you for the final wildcard spot and the last playoff spot. You need to get aggressive in these situations. And again, Cedric Mullins, the only reason why he's on this team, because his bat has just been atrocious. I get that he got the RBI. I'm not the RBI single. I would love an RBI single out of Cedric Mullins, but I mean, he's just not good enough to do that. But you get the single by Cedric Mullins. And again, Cedric Mullins is on this roster for two reasons. Even one reason, because his fielding in center field is not the greatest, especially with his noodle arm. But the main reason why he's even on this roster right now is because of his speed. And like I said, this team is desperate right now for wins. They are desperate for runs. How are you not sending Cedric Mullins in this situation? And I get it didn't come back to bite him in this game, but just like if you guys recall back to the second game of the Washington National Series, where, and I believe, I forgot who got the base hit. I forgot who got the base hit, but it was in the top of the ninth. And again, I forgot who got the base hit, but Cedric Mullins comes into pinch run, and Luis Torrens was up at the plate. And because the Mets did not send Cedric Mullins in that spot, Luis Torrens, who was hitting in that spot, ends up hitting a ground ball, and the Mets end up losing that game because they end up because Torrens ends up hitting into a ground ball play. And again, it didn't come back to bite him in this situation because Alvarez did not hit into a double play. But again, like I've stated before, this team is so desperate for wins. They are so desperate for runs. They are so desperate for any type of offense You have to be aggressive. You have to send Cedric Mullins in that spot. I'm sorry. They don't. Alvarez strikes out, and then Lindor grounds out to get out of that inning. And then once they got out of that inning and it moved on to the top of the 10th, and especially once we saw Ryan Stanek come into this game and we saw him warm up at the bullpen, I had no faith that the Mets were going to win this game. I really had no faith when the Rangers tied the game up at 2-2 in the in the 7th or 6th inning. But when I saw Stanek come up to the mound, I'm like, yeah, no shot at winning this game. And another thing, I get that Diaz hadn't been sharp in the inning that he pitched in the 9th inning, and he wasn't sharp at all in yesterday's game. But you have an off day tomorrow, and like I said before, you're desperate for wins. Edwin Diaz only threw 7 pitches. Why is he not going out there for the 10th inning? And listen, I get that it worked. I get that Stanek came through. But again, this is something that we've talked about and we've covered many times. Just because Stanek went out there and was able to get through that inning does not mean it was the right decision. It does not. Because as we know, most of the time when Stanek is put into those situations, he doesn't come through. And listen, thankfully, in this situation, he did. But again, this is another situation for me where Mendoza just does not have a proper feel of the game. So Brett Beatty remains in the game at DH. And as I said, Stanek comes in to replace Diaz. Josh Smith is the ghost runner on second base. Wyatt Langford flies out. Jock Peterson walks. Adolis Garcia strikes out. And then Rowdy Tellez would pop out to Mark Vientos in foul territory. So the Mets, thankfully, were able to get out of that inning. And then we move on to the bottom of the 10th. Luis Crivello comes in to replace Sean Armstrong. Francisco Alvarez, who made the last out, was the ghost runner. So he intentionally walks Juan Soto, and then Pete Alonso steps up to the plate, who, like I said before, had a terrible game so far up until that point, and he ends up hitting an opposite field home run into right field, and the Mets win the game at 5-2 as they snap their 8-game losing streak. And currently, right now, the record sits at 77-73. The A's currently lead, so this is a good thing. The A's currently lead the Reds right now 4-3, top of the 6th inning in Sacramento. And right now, the Dodgers, who are currently playing the Giants right now in San Francisco, they're up 5-1. So if those leads hold, the Mets, I believe, they will go 2.5 in front of Cincinnati and then 1.5 in front of San Francisco. So for now, the Mets are safe with the final wildcard spot, but listen, I am not comfortable at all, and I'm sure you guys watching this post-game show and, guys who are fans of this channel and, who watch us on a regular basis, I'm sure you guys are not comfortable as well. Because, listen, I'm happy that Pete had that home run in the 10th inning to walk it off, but by no way does this mean that home run saved the season, because this team has 12 more games to go, 4 more series. You have a tough series coming up with the San Diego Padres, 3 games set at Citi Field. You then have the final, which could be the last final games at Citi Field for the Mets this year. You have a 3-game set against the Nationals, which, the Mets last series in Washington lost 2 out of 3 to the Nationals. You then have a 3-game set in Chicago, which again is not tough. Is not easy at all because the Cubs are a very good team. And then you finish off that game, or you finish off the season in Miami for a 3-game set. And we know typically whenever if you guys go back to 07, 08, usually the Mets seasons, whenever they end in heartbreak, specifically the regular season, not counting the playoffs, they usually end in Miami or against the Marlins. I know that 07 and 08, they both ended at Chase Stadium, but they were at the hands of the Marlins. So nice that they won this game, but there's no reason right now to believe that, just because they won this game, that the Mets are going to clinch the playoffs. Like I said, 12 games is still a lot of games left to go. 4 more series, and as I mentioned, 2 tough series against the Padres and Cubs, and then 2 series that could potentially be bogey teams against Nationals and Marlins. Sorry, guys. Let me just get a sip of water here. So, yeah, listen, it's going to be a tough road to the finish line, but listen, hopefully that's a home run that could kickstart the Mets and gets them at least playing at a semi-respectable level again. Listen, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to be confident. I'm sure you guys in the chat aren't comfortable either. I'm about to switch over to you guys and go through you guys' comments. But yeah, listen, they won this game. wasn't pretty. A lot of the same aspects that we've seen, specifically of yesterday's game and most of the games that we've seen, not only in the second half, but just, majority of the games that we've seen this year. But yeah, they won, and hopefully this could turn something around. But yeah, just gonna be, before we get out of here, just quickly gonna go through you guys' comments here. NGPS, what's going on? Started shedding tears of joy and Ryan Stank through a scoreless inning. I mean, I did not expect that at all. I thought, listen, I thought when that game got to the 10th inning, I thought it was either going to be Helsley or Stanek in that spot. And I thought that the game was just going to implode right there. But listen, thankfully it worked. I don't agree with the decision to go to with Stanek there. I would have left Diaz in personally, but it worked out. I was indifferent about the walk-off as well. Hard to get excited. 100% agree. It's just with the way this team is playing baseball, and listen, listen, and this is the thing that sucks, right? Because this is the same feeling I have about the Rangers, currently going into the season. Like, I want to be excited about these games. I want to be excited whenever the Mets win a game or hit a walk-off home run, but it's just with how the last couple months have gone and with the amount of piss poor baseball this team has played, it's like it's so hard to get excited. And listen, I really do hope that this turns the season around. I do. It's just, for the last 5-6 months, we've not seen any, or, even the last 3 months specifically, we have not seen any evidence to show that. So listen, I hope they prove me wrong. And as me and Evan say, we always hope that they prove us wrong, but we have to see it to believe it. But hopefully they can turn it around. Evan, if we could duplicate Nolan McLean 5 to 6 times, we can maybe have a chance of going somewhere. But sadly, we can't, and they lose this game with any other starter. Absolutely. And even to that point, right? Like, you had Brandon Sproat, who went out there and balled out yesterday, gave you 6 shutout innings, and look how that turned out. And it was very easily going on that same path today, where you have 6 shutout innings by Nolan McLean, bullpen comes in, gives up the 2-run lead, and thankfully, instead of yesterday's game where they lose this game, the Mets are able to salvage this win. But it's just it's hard to get excited. Hornigags, I wanted McLean to match up with DeGrom. I think we win that game. Maybe, who knows? But I mean, listen, even in that game, right? Like Tong gets lit up, right? But again, like, the offense only puts up 3 runs in that game. I mean, and listen, that's something we're going to talk about more on the podcast tomorrow. But it's just like, it's hard to win these games when your offense is not really giving you anything to work with. The amount of backwards Ks that he had. Yeah, like I brought up, the amount of times he was freezing hitters on on sinkers was just insane. That sinker was easily his best pitch. Pantries, it's nice that they won this game, and I like what they did, but they need to build on it. They need to start winning games and winning series. We'll doubt until they do. 100%. 6-game rookie is our ace. How bad it is. Yeah, it's not a great look right now. It's not a great look, but I'm just thankful that we have Nolan McLean, and I'm sure you are too, Hornet. I'm very thankful that we have Nolan McLean, and he's going to be a bright spot. Because listen, even if this season ends in disaster, and the Mets miss the playoffs, or even if they get in and they get bounced in the wild card, I still think this franchise and this organization has a bright future going forward, and Nolan McLean is going to have a very important role in this franchise going forward. So, like I said, even if the season ends in disaster, which, don't get me wrong, it's going to be terrible and people will have to be held accountable, but I can at least point to Nolan McLean and say, kid, you have balls, and this is someone that I want to build this franchise around. Agree 100%. Thank you, Bayonet, and welcome to the show. Mendoza is a bench coach at most. I mean, yeah, he's not. And listen, I mean, we're going to talk about this more tomorrow on the podcast, because obviously Mendoza had some mistakes too in the second game of the series as well. But it's just, like I said, for me, it feels like he doesn't have a feel for the game, and he doesn't have a feel for his players either. And again, I don't know if he's flustered. I don't know if he can't handle the pressure per se. But listen, if that's the case, because listen, this is a franchise going forward that, like I said, even if the season ends in disaster, going into next season, the expectations are going to go right back to winning the World Series. That's something that I brought up on the last podcast. So listen, if Mendoza's showing that he can't handle the pressure now, I'm sorry, then there's just no way that he could be back next year. There just isn't. Will, Mets are full as gold. I mean, I can't argue with that. And Elvin Solano, go to win. I'll take the win. Whether it was good or not, I can't really agree on that. It wasn't a great win, but this team is desperate for wins right now, and I guess I guess I'll take it. I'll take it in that situation. But anyway, guys, that's gonna be it for me. As I mentioned before, we will have a podcast tomorrow. I'm not sure what time yet, but of course we'll break down this game. We'll cover, or not even the game, but we'll talk about. We'll break down this past series against the Rangers, and then we'll preview the upcoming 3-game set at Citi Field against the San Diego Padres. But as always, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe in the channel. We greatly appreciate you guys' support here on the channel, and make sure you guys hit the notification bell to let you guys know anytime we upload a video or go live here on Mets Central. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me. Peace out. Let's go, Mets.